The day had started like any other for Clara, but by late afternoon it felt as though the universe was conspiring against her. She had spent hours trudging through the city, dropping off resumes at every cafe, bookstore, and office building she could find. Her shoes were worn thin, her feet ached, and her spirits were lower than they'd been in weeks. Job hunting wasn't just tiring, it was soul-crushing. Every no or ignored application made her feel smaller, less significant. But Clara refused to give up. She reminded herself that persistence was key, even when hope seemed distant. As the sky turned gray and rain clouds gathered overhead, Clara decided it was time to head home. The bus stop was only a few blocks away from the train station where she now stood, waiting for her connection. Rain began to drizzle lightly and she pulled her coat tighter around herself, trying to shield against the chill. Her bag felt heavier than usual, weighed down not just by its contents but also by the frustration of another unfruitful day. Still, she clutched it close, knowing it held the last remnants of her dwindling resources: a granola bar, an old library card, and exactly $10 in cash. Clara sat on one of the cold metal benches near the platform, staring blankly at the tracks ahead. Trains came and went, bringing bursts of wind and noise with them, but none stopped for her yet. People hurried, past, their faces buried in scarves or focused on their phones. It was a lonely scene, and Clara couldn't help but feel invisible among the crowd. Just as she was about to check her watch again, she noticed someone standing nearby who seemed out of place. He was a tall man, probably in his mid-30s, dressed sharply in a tailored suit that looked expensive despite being slightly disheveled. His tie hung loosely around his neck and his hair was mussed as though he'd run his hands through it repeatedly. He paced back and forth, muttering under his breath while patting down his pockets over and over again. Something about him caught Clara's attention. Perhaps it was the contrast between his polished appearance and his current state of obvious distress. Curiosity got the better of her, and she watched him for a moment longer before deciding to speak up. "Is everything okay?" she asked cautiously, her voice barely audible over the rumble of a departing train. The man stopped pacing and turned toward her. His eyes widened slightly, as if surprised anyone had noticed him. For a second, he hesitated, then nodded awkwardly. "Yeah, He sighed deeply, running a hand through his already messy hair. "I think I've misplaced my wallet. I don't have any cash, and I need to get home." Clara frowned, unsure of what to say next. Misplacing a wallet was stressful enough, but this man didn't look like someone who would struggle financially. His suit alone likely cost more than her monthly rent. Was he telling the truth? Or was this some elaborate scam? She glanced around, the platform, searching for clues, or maybe reassurance, but no one else seemed to be paying attention to them. "I'm sorry," the man continued, breaking the silence. "I know this sounds ridiculous. Believe me, I wouldn't ask unless I absolutely had to." He met her gaze earnestly, and there was something genuine in his expression that made Clara pause. Maybe it was the exhaustion etched into his face or the way his shoulders slumped slightly, as though carrying the weight of the world. Whatever it was, it softened her skepticism. Her fingers instinctively tightened around the strap of her bag, where her precious $10 bill lay hidden. $10 wasn't much, but it was everything she had left until payday. If she gave it away, she'd have to walk home instead of taking the bus, a journey that would take nearly an hour in. The worsening weather. And dinner? That would probably consist of whatever stale crackers remained in her cupboard, but as she studied the stranger's face, she thought about how many times she'd wished someone would cut her a break when she was struggling. How often? Had she prayed for a little kindness during her darkest moments? This man might not need her help as desperately as she sometimes did, but right now he clearly needed it more than she did. With a deep breath, Clara reached into her bag and pulled out the crumpled bill. "Here," she said quietly, holding it out to him. "Take this. It's not much, but it should cover your fare." The man stared at the money for a moment, then at Clara, as if unable to believe what he was seeing. Finally, he accepted it, his fingers brushing hers briefly. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have no idea how much this means to me." Clara shrugged, trying to play it cool despite the knot forming in her stomach. "Don't mention it, we all have bad days." He nodded, still looking overwhelmed. After a moment, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a pen and a small scrap of paper. Scribbling something quickly, he handed it to her. "If you ever need anything at all, please call me, I mean it. I owe you one." Clara glanced at the paper, which bore a name and phone number scrawled hastily in blue ink. Jonathan Reed. She tucked it into her bag without giving it much thought, assuming she'd never use it. As the stranger disappeared into the crowd, she leaned back against the bench, feeling both proud and slightly foolish. Proud because she'd done the right thing even when it hurt. Foolish because she wasn't sure she'd ever see that $10 again, or the man who took it. Raindrops began to fall more steadily now, tapping gently against the roof of the shelter. Clara zipped up her coat and prepared to wait a little longer for her train. She didn't realize it yet, but this simple act of generosity would ripple outward, changing her life in ways she couldn't possibly imagine. The days that followed Clara's encounter at the train station were unremarkable, blending into the monotony of her routine. She returned to her small apartment, ate a meager dinner of toast and peanut butter, and spent the evening scrolling through job listings on her laptop. Her mind occasionally drifted back to the stranger with the expensive suit and the misplaced wallet, but she quickly dismissed the thought. Life had taught her not to dwell on fleeting acts of kindness, especially when they cost her something tangible, like her last $10. By the next morning, the memory of the man had faded almost entirely. Clara woke up early, brewed a cup of instant coffee, and headed out for another round of job hunting. The city buzzed around her as she walked from one business to another, handing out copies of her resume and answering questions about her qualifications. Most places turned her away politely, while others didn't even bother responding. It was frustrating, exhausting, and demoralizing, but Clara refused to let herself sink into despair. She reminded herself that perseverance was key, even when hope felt like a distant flicker. It wasn't until later that evening, as she sat on the edge of her bed scrolling through social media, that the stranger re-entered her thoughts in a way she never expected. A headline popped up on her feed: "Local tech mogul loses wallet during secret commute challenge." Intrigued, Clara clicked on the article, her curiosity piqued by the title. What unfolded on the screen left her stunned. The article featured a photograph of a man who looked eerily familiar, too familiar. He was dressed in the same sharp suit she remembered, though now it was impeccably tailored and paired with a confident smile. The caption beneath the photo identified him as Jonathan Reed, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar tech company called Innovatech. According to the piece, Jonathan had embarked on an unusual experiment. He wanted to experience the daily commute of an average citizen to better understand their challenges. To make the experience authentic, he intentionally left his luxury car and driver behind, opting instead to rely on public transportation. But things took an unexpected turn when he realized his wallet was missing. Clara read the article twice, her heart pounding with each word. This was the same man she'd met at the train station, the same man who'd promised to repay her somehow. Only now she understood the enormity of what she'd done. She hadn't just lent $10 to a stranger, she'd helped a millionaire, possibly even a billionaire, get home after a bad day. The realization hit her like a freight train, leaving her both awestruck and slightly embarrassed. Here she was, struggling to make ends meet, while the person she'd helped commanded wealth beyond her wildest dreams. Her eyes darted to the crumpled scrap of paper sitting on her bedside table, the one with Jonathan's name and number scribbled on it. For days it had been nothing more than a forgotten memento tucked away in her bag and forgotten. Now it seemed to glow with significance. Clara picked it up, smoothing out the wrinkles as if handling something fragile. Should she call him? Was it too late? Did he even remember her? For hours she wrestled with indecision. On one hand, reaching out felt presumptuous. What would she say? Hey, remember me? I'm the person who gave you $10. On the other hand, this could be her chance to turn things around. Maybe Jonathan would honor his promise to help her somehow, or maybe he wouldn't. Either way, the uncertainty gnawed at her. Finally, unable to ignore the nagging voice in her head, Clara decided to take a leap of faith. She grabbed her phone, typed out a short text message, and hit send before she could second-guess herself. "Hi, Mr. Reed," it read. "This is Clara. We met at the train station a few weeks ago. Hope you're doing well." To her surprise, Jonathan replied almost immediately. His response was warm and friendly, filled with gratitude. "Clara, of course I remember you. You saved me that day. How are you?" Relieved that he hadn't forgotten her, Clara explained her situation briefly, mentioning her ongoing struggle to find stable employment. She kept the tone light, careful not to sound desperate or entitled. Jonathan listened, or rather read, with genuine interest, asking thoughtful follow-up questions. By the end of their exchange, he insisted they meet for coffee to catch up, properly. When the day of their meeting arrived, Clara found herself unusually nervous. She chose her outfit carefully, settling on a simple yet professional ensemble that made her feel confident. As she entered the cozy cafe where they'd agreed to meet, her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Jonathan. He stood up to greet her, extending a hand with a warm smile. Up close, he looked less like the polished executive from the magazine article and more like the disheveled man she'd encountered at the train station. There was a humility about him that put her at ease. They ordered drinks and settled into a quiet corner of the cafe. Jonathan began by thanking her again, this time with even greater sincerity. "I can't tell you how much your kindness meant to me that day," he said. "You didn't hesitate even though I could see you didn't have much to spare. That's rare these days." Clara shrugged modestly, feeling a blush creep onto her cheeks. "I figured anyone would have done the same." Jonathan shook his head. "Not everyone. Trust me, I know. People tend to look out for themselves first, but you saw someone in need and acted without expecting anything in return. That's leadership material right there." His words caught her off guard. Leadership? Her? The idea seemed laughable. Clara had spent most of her life feeling invisible, overlooked, and underappreciated. Yet here was Jonathan, treating her as though she possessed qualities worth admiring. It was disorienting, but also exhilarating. As their conversation continued, Clara opened up about her struggles, her endless job applications, mounting bills, and the constant worry about whether she'd ever break free from the cycle of financial instability. Jonathan listened intently, nodding occasionally and asking clarifying questions. When she finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You're stronger than you realize," he said finally. "And you have potential. I'd like to offer you a position at my company, if you're interested. Of course, nothing fancy to start with, but I think you'd fit in well. Plus, I owe you one, don't I?" Clara stared at him, momentarily speechless. This wasn't just an opportunity, it was a lifeline. For the first time in months, maybe even years, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps her act of kindness hadn't been in vain after all. Perhaps it truly did pay to believe in people, even when they seemed worlds apart. As they parted ways later that afternoon, Jonathan handed her a sleek business card embossed with the Innovatech logo. "Welcome aboard," he said with a grin. Clara clutched the card tightly, feeling a surge of determination. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready to face it head-on. Clara's first day at Innovatech arrived faster than she expected. The night before, she barely slept, her mind racing with a mix of excitement and anxiety. What if she wasn't good enough? What if Jonathan had overestimated her abilities? These doubts swirled in her head like a storm, but she pushed them aside as best she could. She reminded herself that this was an opportunity, a chance to prove not only to others but also to herself that she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined. The next morning, Clara woke up early, dressed carefully, and stood in front of the mirror for several minutes practicing a confident smile. She wanted to make a good impression, not just because Jonathan had given her this chance, but because she owed it to herself to show up fully. With a deep breath, she grabbed her bag, checked one last time for her new employee ID card, and stepped out into the crisp morning air. Innovatech's headquarters loomed ahead as Clara approached the building. It was sleek and modern, its glass facade reflecting the sunlight in dazzling patterns. People bustled in and out, chatting animatedly or typing furiously on their phones. Clara felt a pang of intimidation but quickly reminded herself why she was here. She straightened her posture, took another steadying breath, and walked through the revolving doors. Inside, the lobby was a hive of activity. A receptionist greeted her warmly and directed her to the Human Resources Department, where she completed the necessary paperwork. Afterward, she was introduced to Sarah, a friendly woman who would be her supervisor during her initial weeks. Sarah gave her a quick tour of the office, pointing out key areas like the break room, conference rooms, and her designated workspace. By the end of the tour, Clara's nerves had settled slightly, replaced by a growing sense of curiosity about her new surroundings. Her role was entry-level, administrative assistant, but it came with responsibilities that challenged her right away. On her first task, she was asked to organize files for an upcoming project. At first glance, it seemed straightforward, but as she delved deeper, she realized how intricate the process was. There were countless documents, spreadsheets, and emails to sift through, each requiring careful attention to detail. Clara found herself completely absorbed, determined to get everything right. Hours flew by without her noticing, and when Sarah stopped by to check on her progress, Clara proudly presented her work. "Wow," Sarah said, genuinely impressed. "You've done a fantastic job. I didn't expect you to finish so quickly or so thoroughly." Clara beamed, feeling a rush of pride. For the first time in ages, she felt truly valued. This wasn't just a paycheck, it was validation that she belonged here, among people who appreciated her efforts. As the days turned into weeks, Clara began to settle into a rhythm. She learned the ins and outs of the company, familiarizing herself with its culture and values. One thing that struck her immediately was how different Innovatech felt compared to previous workplaces. The environment was collaborative rather than competitive, with team members openly sharing ideas and supporting one another. Mistakes weren't punished harshly, they were treated as learning opportunities. And then there was Jonathan, whose presence lingered in subtle ways throughout the office. Employees spoke highly of him, describing him as approachable, visionary, and deeply invested in his staff's success. Jonathan himself made it a point to check in with Clara regularly. Sometimes, he'd stop by her desk to ask how things were going or invite her to join meetings where decisions were being made. These interactions weren't just formalities, they were genuine attempts to mentor her. He encouraged her to voice her opinions no matter how inexperienced she felt, and praised her whenever she contributed something meaningful. Slowly but surely, Clara began to see herself differently, not as someone struggling to keep afloat, but as someone capable of making a real impact. One afternoon, Jonathan called her into his office. Clara entered nervously, unsure of what to expect. Had she made a mistake? Was he reconsidering her position? Instead, he gestured for her to sit down and handed her a folder. Inside were details about a new initiative aimed at improving workplace efficiency. "I want you to lead this project," he said simply. Clara blinked, certain she'd misheard him. "Lead it? Me?" "Yes, you," Jonathan replied with a smile. "You've proven yourself already, Clara. You're organized, detail-oriented, and willing to learn. Those are exactly the qualities we need for this project to succeed." For a moment, Clara was speechless. Leading a project? At a company like Innovatech? It sounded impossible, yet Jonathan's confidence in her was unwavering. She nodded slowly, determination replacing her initial disbelief. If he believed in her, then she owed it to both of them to give it her all. Over the following weeks, Clara threw herself into the project with relentless energy. She collaborated with colleagues, brainstormed solutions, and tackled obstacles head-on. When challenges arose, and they did, she faced them with resilience, drawing strength from the support around her. Along the way, she discovered skills she hadn't known she possessed: problem-solving, leadership, communication. Each small victory boosted her confidence, reinforcing the belief that she was capable of achieving great things. But it wasn't just professional growth that Clara experienced. Working at Innovatech rekindled something within her, a spark of hope and ambition she thought had dimmed long ago. She started dreaming bigger, imagining possibilities she'd once dismissed as unrealistic. Perhaps someday she'd rise even higher within the company. Perhaps she'd inspire others the way Jonathan had inspired her. Whatever the future held, Clara knew one thing for certain. She was no longer the same person who had lent her last $10 at the train station. That act of kindness had set off a chain reaction, transforming not only her circumstances but also her perspective on life. And though she still carried the memory of those difficult days, the endless job searches, the financial struggles, the moments of doubt, she viewed them now not as failures but as stepping stones. They had shaped her, taught her resilience, and ultimately led her to this moment. As she sat at her desk late one evening, reviewing notes for the next phase of her project, Clara smiled to herself. She had come so far already, and she couldn't wait to see where this journey would take her next. Clara's role at Innovatech continued to evolve, and with each passing week she found herself stepping further out of her comfort zone. Leading the efficiency project was both exhilarating and daunting, but it pushed her to grow in ways she never anticipated. At first, the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. Here she was, a newcomer to the corporate world, entrusted with a task that could influence the company's operations. But Jonathan's faith in her never wavered, and his encouragement became a steady anchor during moments of self-doubt. The project itself revolved around streamlining internal processes to reduce waste and improve productivity. It required Clara to collaborate with teams across departments, finance, marketing, IT, and logistics, all of whom brought different perspectives and priorities to the table. Initially, she worried about how to bridge these gaps and ensure everyone felt heard. What if they didn't take her seriously? What if her ideas fell flat? These fears lingered in the back of her mind, but she refused to let them paralyze her. Her first major challenge came when disagreements arose between two departments over resource allocation. The finance team argued for cost-cutting measures, while the IT department insisted on investing in new software to automate certain tasks. Tensions ran high, and Clara found herself caught in the middle. For days, she struggled to find common ground, poring over data and consulting with colleagues to understand both sides of the argument. Finally, she proposed a compromise. Implement a pilot program using scaled-down versions of the software to test its effectiveness before committing fully. To her relief and surprise, the suggestion was met with approval from both teams. That small victory gave Clara a boost of confidence. She realized that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about listening, adapting, and finding solutions that worked for everyone. As the project progressed, she grew more adept at navigating challenges, earning respect from her peers along the way. They began seeking her input not just on the project, but on other initiatives as slowly, Clara transitioned from being seen as the new hire to someone whose opinions mattered. Jonathan noticed this transformation too. He often stopped by her desk or joined meetings where she presented updates, offering feedback and praise. One afternoon, after a particularly successful presentation, he pulled her aside. "You're doing incredible work," he said, his tone warm but serious. "I knew you had potential, but I didn't realize how much until now." Clara smiled, feeling a swell of pride. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without your support or the team's." "That's exactly why you're succeeding," Jonathan replied. "You give credit where it's due and you lift others up. Those are rare qualities in a leader." His words stayed with her long after their conversation ended. For so long, Clara had doubted her abilities, convinced she wasn't smart or skilled enough to thrive in a competitive environment like Innovatech. Yet here she was, proving herself wrong every day. More importantly, she was learning that success wasn't just about individual achievement. It was about building connections, fostering collaboration, and creating opportunities for others to shine. As the months went by, Clara's responsibilities expanded beyond the efficiency project. She was invited to participate in strategy sessions, brainstorming ideas for future ventures and analyzing market trends. Her contributions were valued, and her insights often sparked lively discussions among senior executives. It was during one such session that Clara had an epiphany, a bold idea that would change the trajectory of her career. The topic of discussion was community outreach. Innovatech had always prided itself on innovation, but there was growing pressure to address social issues and give back to the communities it served. Several proposals were on the table, ranging from charitable donations to volunteer programs, but none seemed to capture the room's enthusiasm. Clara listened intently, jotting down notes as ideas flowed. Then, tentatively, she raised her hand. "What if we created a platform to connect underserved communities with tech education?" she suggested. "We could offer free workshops, mentorship programs, and even internships to help people gain skills they might not otherwise access." The room fell silent for a moment as everyone processed her idea. Then, slowly, murmurs of agreement began to ripple through the group. Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes lighting up. "That's brilliant," he said. "It aligns perfectly with our mission to innovate, not just in technology but in how we impact lives." Encouraged by the positive response, Clara volunteered to spearhead the initiative. Over the next few weeks, she worked tirelessly to develop a detailed plan, outlining everything from curriculum design to partnerships with local organizations. Her passion for the project was infectious, inspiring others to join her cause. By the time she presented the finalized proposal to the executive board, it had evolved into something far greater than she'd initially envisioned. When the board approved the initiative unanimously, Clara felt a surge of emotion, pride, gratitude, and a deep sense of purpose. This wasn't just another professional milestone. It was proof that kindness and empathy could drive meaningful change. The same values that had led her to lend her last $10 to a stranger were now shaping her approach to leadership. Her personal life began to reflect this growth as well. With a stable income and newfound confidence, Clara started exploring hobbies she'd neglected for years. She joined a book club, took up painting classes, and even volunteered at a local shelter on weekends. Each experience enriched her life, reminding her of the importance of balance and connection. She also reconnected with old friends, sharing stories of her journey and Marvel New Line. Clara's transformation wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. As she continued to grow in her role at Innovatech, she found herself reflecting on how far she'd come since that rainy afternoon at the train station. The woman, who had once hesitated to lend her last $10, now stood confidently at the helm of a groundbreaking community outreach initiative. But more than anything, Clara realized that her journey was about more than climbing the corporate ladder or achieving success. It was about rediscovering who she was and what truly mattered to her. The community outreach program quickly became one of Innovatech's flagship projects. Dubbed Tech for All, it aimed to bridge the digital divide by providing free tech education and mentorship to underserved communities. Clara poured her heart into every aspect of the program, from designing workshops to recruiting volunteers. She spent countless hours visiting schools, libraries, and community centers, meeting people who were eager to learn but lacked access to resources. Each interaction reminded her of her own struggles, the days when she felt invisible, overlooked, and unsure of her place in the world. Now she had the power to make a difference, and she approached the task with unwavering dedication. One of the most rewarding aspects of the program was seeing its impact firsthand. During a workshop at a local youth center, Clara met a teenage girl named Mia. Shy and reserved, Mia initially kept to herself, barely participating in the activities. But as the weeks went by, Clara noticed a change. Mia began asking questions, experimenting with coding exercises, and even helping her peers troubleshoot problems. By the end of the program, she proudly presented a simple app she'd built, a tool to help organize school assignments. When Mia thanked Clara for believing in her, tears welled up in Clara's eyes. In that moment, she saw herself in Mia, a young person hungry for opportunity, searching for someone to tell them they were capable of greatness. Word of the program spread quickly, earning praise not only within Innovatech, but also in the wider community. Local newspapers wrote articles highlighting its success, and social media buzzed with stories of participants whose lives had been transformed. Clara became the face of the initiative, invited to speak at conferences and panel discussions. At first, public speaking terrified her. Standing in front of an audience felt like stepping onto a stage without a script, but with practice and Jonathan's encouragement, she grew more comfortable sharing her story. She talked about her struggles, her leap of faith at the train station, and how kindness had set her on this unexpected path. Her speeches resonated with listeners, many of whom reached out afterward to express their gratitude or share their own experiences. Jonathan watched Clara's rise with quiet admiration. He had always believed in her potential, but even he was amazed by how much she had achieved in such a short time. What struck him most was her humility. Despite her growing influence, Clara remained grounded, never losing sight of the values that defined her. She treated everyone with respect, whether they were interns, executives, or students in her workshops. Her ability to connect with people from all walks of life was extraordinary, and Jonathan often found himself wondering if he would have recognized her true potential had their paths not crossed that fateful day. Their relationship evolved over time, shifting from mentor and mentee to something resembling a partnership. Jonathan frequently sought Clara's input on major decisions, valuing her fresh perspective and innovative ideas. In turn, Clara appreciated his guidance and support, recognizing that his belief in her had been instrumental in her growth. They made a formidable team, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. Colleagues joked that they were the dream duo, though neither Clara nor Jonathan paid much attention to the nickname. To them, it was simply a natural collaboration, born out of mutual respect. As Clara's responsibilities increased, so did her confidence. She began taking on leadership roles outside of work, joining boards and committees focused on education and social equity. Her voice carried weight, and she used it to advocate for causes close to her heart. Whether lobbying for policy changes or mentoring young professionals, Clara embraced her role as a change-maker, yet she never forgot where she came from. Every achievement was a reminder of how far she'd come and how much farther she still wanted to go. Her personal life flourished alongside her career. With financial stability came newfound freedom, allowing Clara to pursue passions she'd long neglected. She rekindled old friendships, nurturing relationships that had faded during her years of struggle. She also formed new connections, bonding with colleagues and community members who shared her vision for a better future. On weekends, she could often be found volunteering at a shelter or attending art exhibits, finding joy in experiences that enriched her soul. Despite her busy schedule, Clara made time for reflection. She kept a journal, jotting down thoughts and lessons learned along the way. Writing helped her process her emotions and stay grounded amidst the whirlwind of activity. One evening, as she sat by her window with a cup of tea, she flipped through the pages of her journal. Entries chronicled her journey, the highs and lows, the doubts and triumphs, the moments of fear and courage. Reading them brought a sense of clarity. She realized that her greatest strength lay not in her skills or accomplishments, but in her resilience. No matter how difficult things got, she had always found a way to keep moving forward. This realization inspired Clara to pay it forward. Just as Jonathan had believed in her, she vowed to do the same for others. She started mentoring young employees at Innovatech, offering guidance and encouragement whenever they needed it. She also expanded the reach of Tech for All, partnering with organizations across the country to bring tech education to even more communities. Her ultimate goal was to create a ripple effect, empowering others to dream big and chase their ambitions. By the time Clara received the invitation to attend Innovatech's annual charity gala, she felt ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The event celebrated individuals and organizations making a positive impact, and Clara had been nominated for her work with Tech for All. As she prepared for the evening, she couldn't help but smile at the irony. A few years ago, she'd been struggling to make ends meet, unsure if she'd ever find her footing. Now she was being honored for changing lives, including her own. The night of the gala arrived, and Clara stepped into the grand ballroom feeling both nervous and excited. The room sparkled with chandeliers and elegant decor, filled with guests dressed in formal attire. As she mingled with attendees, she marveled at how different her life had become. Yet, deep down, she knew she was still the same person who had lent her last $10 at the train station. That act of kindness had set everything in motion, proving that even the smallest gestures could lead to extraordinary outcomes. When her name was called for the award, Clara walked to the stage with a mix of pride and humility. As she stood behind the podium looking out at the sea of faces, she took a deep breath and began to speak. Her words flowed effortlessly, weaving together her past, present, and hopes for the future. She spoke of kindness, resilience, and the transformative power of human connection. And as the audience erupted into applause, Clara felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This was more than just recognition. It was validation that her journey had meaning, not just for her but for everyone whose lives she had touched along the way. Clara's speech at the charity gala resonated deeply with everyone in the room. Her words were simple yet powerful, filled with honesty and vulnerability. She spoke about the day she lent her last $10 to a stranger at the train station, a moment that had seemed so insignificant at the time, but had ultimately changed her life forever. As she recounted her struggles, her doubts, and her eventual triumphs, there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. Even Jonathan, seated near the front, found himself blinking back tears. He had always admired Clara's resilience, but hearing her story told with such raw emotion was profoundly moving. When Clara finished speaking, the room erupted into thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering as if unwilling to let the moment end. For Clara, it felt surreal. Just a few years ago, she had been invisible to the world, another face in the crowd, struggling to make ends meet. Now, here, she was, standing on stage, celebrated for her contributions and her unwavering belief in the power of kindness. It was humbling, exhilarating, and slightly overwhelming all at once. After the ceremony, guests gathered around Clara, eager to congratulate her and share their own stories. Many thanked her for inspiring them to take action in their own lives, to reach out to help others, to believe in possibilities they hadn't considered before. One woman approached her with tears in her eyes, saying, "Your story reminds me that even when we think our actions are small, they can have a huge impact." Clara smiled warmly, touched by the sentiment. That was exactly what she hoped people would take away from her journey. Not just admiration for her achievements, but a renewed faith in the goodness of humanity. Jonathan eventually made his way through the crowd to join Clara. His expression was one of quiet pride, though he couldn't resist teasing her lightly. "Well," he said with a grin, "I guess I'll have to stop calling you the girl who saved my day. You're kind of a big deal now." Clara laughed, shaking her head. "Don't start," she replied playfully. "You know none of this would have happened without you. If you hadn't given me a chance, I'd probably still be handing out resumes and wondering what could have been." Jonathan's smile softened, and he placed a hand on her shoulder. "Clara, you gave yourself the chance. All I did was open the door. You walked through it, and look where you are now." His words struck a chord within her. While she appreciated Jonathan's role in her journey, she knew he was right. She had taken risks, embraced challenges, and refused to give up, even when things seemed impossible. Success wasn't handed to her. It was earned through hard work, determination, and an unshakable belief in herself. And yet she also recognized that kindness had played a pivotal role. That single act of lending her last $10 had sparked a chain reaction, leading her to opportunities she never could have imagined. As the evening wound down, Clara found herself reflecting on the full circle nature of her journey. From the rainy afternoon at the train station to the glittering ballroom of the charity gala, every step had brought her closer to understanding who she truly was. She realized that success wasn't defined by titles or accolades. It was about making a difference, however large or small. Whether it was helping a stranger get home, mentoring a young employee, or empowering underserved communities through tech for all, Clara had discovered purpose in service to others. In the weeks following the gala, Clara continued to build on her momentum. The recognition she received opened doors to new opportunities, allowing her to expand the reach of her initiatives. Tech for All grew exponentially, partnering with schools, nonprofits, and corporations to provide resources and support to those in need. Clara traveled across the country, delivering keynote speeches and leading workshops, sharing her message of hope and resilience with audiences of all ages. Yet no matter how busy her schedule became, she remained committed to staying grounded. She made it a point to visit local community centers regularly, rolling up her sleeves and working alongside participants in her programs. To Clara, these moments were just as important, if not more so than any award or headline. One particularly memorable visit took her back to the youth center where she had first met Mia. Now a high school senior, Mia had blossomed into a confident, young woman with dreams of becoming a software engineer. She greeted Clara with a hug, proudly showing off her latest project, an app designed to connect volunteers with local shelters. "I wouldn't be here without you," Mia said earnestly. "You showed me that I could do anything if I worked. Hard enough." Clara hugged her tightly, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "No, Mia," she replied. "You did this. You believed in yourself, and you made it happen. I'm just glad I got to be part of your journey." Moments like these reminded Clara why she had chosen this path. Every success story, every grateful smile, reinforced her belief that kindness and compassion could transform lives, including her own. She often thought about the ripple effect of that rainy day at the train station. By lending her last $10, she had unknowingly set off a wave of positivity that had touched countless lives, including hers. It was a beautiful reminder that we are all connected and our actions, no matter how small, have the power to create meaningful change. Jonathan remained a steadfast presence in Clara's life, though their relationship had evolved beyond mentorship. They collaborated closely on various projects, combining their strengths to tackle complex challenges. Their partnership was built on mutual respect and shared values, and they often joked that fate had brought them together for a reason. "If you hadn't misplaced your wallet that day, none of this would have happened," Clara teased during one of their brainstorming sessions. "True," Jonathan admitted with a chuckle, "but I like to think we both got lucky. I found my wallet eventually, but more importantly, I found someone who reminded me of what really matters." Their bond extended beyond work as well. They frequently discussed their visions for the future, dreaming up ways to amplify their impact. Together, they launched a scholarship fund to support students pursuing careers in technology, ensuring that opportunities reached those who needed them most. They also advocated for policies aimed at reducing inequality and fostering innovation in underserved communities. Through it all, their friendship deepened, rooted in a shared commitment to creating a better world. As Clara looked ahead, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. She no longer worried about proving herself or fitting into someone else's expectations. Instead, she focused on living authentically, guided by her values and passions. Life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges and setbacks, but she faced them with courage and grace, knowing she had the strength to overcome anything. On quiet evenings, Clara sometimes pulled out the crumpled scrap of paper with Jonathan's name and number scribbled on it. It was a tangible reminder of where her journey had begun and how far she had come. She kept it tucked safely in a drawer, not because she needed it anymore, but because it symbolized something greater: the power of human connection, the beauty of second chances, and the infinite potential of kindness. And so, Clara's story came full circle, not as an ending, but as a continuation. She had transformed from a struggling young woman into a leader, a change-maker, and a beacon of hope for others. But more than anything, she remained true to herself. The same person who had once stood at a train station, choosing to lend her last $10 because it was the right thing to do. That decision had changed her life in ways she could never have predicted, proving that even the smallest acts of generosity can spark extraordinary transformations.